Good morning, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of Coffee and Something Stronger. My name is Cody Norrid, Executive Director of Georgia Interfaith Power and Light. And this morning we have on a very special guest, GIPL's new policy associate, Gayla Tillman. Gayla, thanks for joining us this morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
So before we dive in and get started, I think you have a quote for us this morning. So I'll ask you to offer that as a grounding.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me make sure I have it right here. So this quote is by the late, great Toni Cade Bambara. Toni Cade Bambara was an activist, an organizer, a cultural worker, all the great things needed to make a powerful leader in this world. And I wanted to lift this up because the leadership of Black women is often my North Star, but also because of the intersections that I operate from. Where did it go? Oh, here it is. Sorry, shout out to the internet. But the quote goes, "As a cultural worker who belongs to an oppressed people, my job is to make revolution irresistible." And I wanted to start with that just because of how later I'm going to talk more about the intersection of what I bring to my work every single day and what that means as a person that belongs to an oppressed group. So
Yeah, thanks, Gayla. Well, let's go ahead and dive in. I mean, what do you think that quote means to you personally, and then how does it intersect with your work?
Right. So the thing about it is, for one thing, that quote is often misquoted by saying like, "Oh, as an artist," when in reality she says as a cultural worker. So the thing about being a person of color, a woman of color, a person of marginalized gender, there are certain intersections that you bring to your work every single day, whether that be you are a waitress, whether that be you work in policy, whatever it is that you bring to your work every single day, you bring that with your culture with you. That's not something that you separate. And so for me, it's about whether I'm an artist, whether I'm creating like a fact sheet or something, because in so many ways that could be art, whether I'm creating a fact sheet or something accessible for people to look at, I think it's important to bring that to the table, but also in a way that makes people feel like something else is, to make people feel like they are worthy of something else, something better, to make the revolution irresistible, something that you cannot stop thinking about. And so that's what I really think about a lot when it comes to what are the ways that I use my words, my actions, my advocacy to make people feel like this revolution, this betterness, this, preserving of the sacred is something I can't stop thinking about, something that I want very urgently. So yeah, that's kind of like why I thought it was really significant to kick off the conversation with that, because that's something I think about every day, pretty much.
Yeah. Well, you've been with GIPL for a little over a month, diving in and doing our policy work here. You're not new to the space, though. And so I wonder for you, what made the revolution irresistible for you? What got you into this work to begin with?
Yeah, what made the revolution irresistible for me was realizing how structural things were, and that it's one thing to say, oh, someone in my family has asthma, or someone in my family has digestive problems or a heart condition or something like that. And it's a whole different ballgame to say who is responsible for that. It is a whole different thing to ask who is your who and what is your why. And so what got me into this work was realizing that there are people, specifically Black and brown folks, who have astronomical energy bills, who may have an $800 bill, a $900 bill, sometimes in the 4 digits, who are also experiencing flooding. Like Hurricane Michael really catalyzed my position on climate, because I understood the structural failures and how that could literally cost lives and injuries, but also understood that it was something that wasn't like accidental. This was something very much so deliberate, and being analytical of who those people are, those decision makers, was literally directly tied to the livelihood of people that look like myself. So I think that was really my call to action, because once you know that, you can't really unknow it. Like, you can't unknow, oh, this is why this happens. This group of 5 people is really impacting my daily life as a Black person in this state. And so that's what really brought me to this work, this notion that energy burden, yes, but also this larger notion that how we engage with with God's creation, how we engage with nature is not neutral. It is not something that just kind of like happens to us. It's something that we interact with political systems all the time, and we kind of just decide where we want to be in those systems. But yeah.
Yeah, so we do, I mean, you know this, and everybody who's watching, we do a lot of grassroots organizing through our green teams. We do practical climate solutions in congregations, things like solar, energy efficiency. And then we do this policy work because we believe that we have to work at the level of the systemic injustice, that all these things are much larger than one individual community, one individual congregation. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the importance of thinking about policy work as enacting structural justice, and how you work at that, and what that means to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if anything, it's for one thing, it's the reason why I'm excited to be working with GIPL, because honestly, a lot of this is an act of faith, both in the literal sense, but also in the metaphorical sense, in that you need something to cling to, and that if you as an individual are just like, oh, I can't do this thing, or I can't tackle this oil company all by myself, you absolutely can do that with the help of whether that be a local green team or just like state level advocates. And so I think it's really important for folks to understand that the structures that we're looking at are attainable. Like, I think what I really want to do, my goal in this role, is to make people feel like the state and these structures aren't super far away. They're actually integral to our daily lives. Whether that be, you wake up and you look at the news and you realize, oh, a new bill passed, or whether that be a local resolution, what have you. So the goal is to make people feel like, oh, these decisions impact me, because every time I turn on my lights, that energy has to come from somewhere. And who wrote the policy on that energy is someone that belongs to my community, whether we're talking about statewide or local. And so that's really what my goal is to do, in terms of like just making people feel like it's a lot closer to them than it is. And it's also an act of faith, in that like you trusting that the world will be better is something that, is an act of faith. That's not something that's like, that's not something, useless. That's not something that's like silly or anything of that sort. But
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. And you had talked about, policy work isn't that far away, and it's surely not far away for you, as you've been at the Capitol, almost every day since the session has begun. So I wonder if you could tell everybody a little bit about what's going on at the Capitol, and in particular, the sort of pillar priorities for GIPL at the Gold Dome.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's been, an interesting time down under the Gold Dome. And so, as to paint a brief picture, there is still, if you go there, it's still, people are social distancing and things like that. Though, of course, it is still the Gold Dome during a pandemic. It's still very much so different than how we see the hustle and bustle of previous sessions. And so some of the priorities that we're focusing on is energy policy, protecting farmland, and protecting Georgia's water bodies. So one of the bills that I want to talk about, because it's beloved to, I want to say, almost every Georgian in this state. I'm born and raised here, so shout out to everyone that is. But the protection of the Okefenokee. So the Okefenokee is a beloved place. I am very jealous of you if you took a field trip there, because I did not. But it's a very beloved swamp down in South Georgia, and House Bill 1289 is called the Okefenokee Protection Act. It is essentially an act that would revoke the privileges of the EPD to issue permits that could possibly harm the Okefenokee. So right now there is an Alabama-based company that is doing some mining that could threaten the wildlife, the hydrology, all the fun, amazing things that are great about the Okefenokee and contribute to our nature, could threaten all of that. And so the Okefenokee Protection Act basically prohibits that. And so that's a bill that we've been, advocating hard for under the Gold Dome, speaking with legislators and telling them like, hey, myself, several faith leaders that I, advocate alongside, care about the protection of the Okefenokee. And so hopefully we will see some movement on that bill, and hopefully we will see more support for the Okefenokee grow across the state. Another bill I want to bring up, and I won't say too many, just FYI.
And if you're, sorry, Gayla, before you go on, I'll just mention for everybody who is hearing all this and wondering, how do I get involved? How do I do something? We'll drop a link in the comments where you can take action and submit comments. And of course, you can always reach out to myself or to Gayla.
Yeah, 100%. Also, on that note, we're a member of the Georgia Water Coalition. So the fun thing about being under the Gold Dome is I'm not alone. And so later on, I can talk about Capital Conservation Day and how folks listening can, come and see my little old face down under the Gold Dome. So yes. And then the other bill I wanted to mention is House Bill 1150. Unfortunately, House Bill 1150 is a bad neighbor bill. This is a bill that would decrease, would upend some of the protections that farmers currently have in the state of Georgia, making it easier for a larger corporation to come in, move in, and essentially become a bad actor, whether that's spreading feces of the hogs or the chickens that they have on their large operation, whether that be the smell from the species, wow, almost said species, of the feces, dust, noise, all these things, all of these kind of like nuisances, because essentially HB 1150 is about a nuisance. It's about making sure HB 1150 is about taking away the property rights of people who don't want a nuisance in their backyard. It's a bad neighbor bill, essentially. And the same way that we'll have you take action for Okefenokee is a similar way we'll have people take action for 1150. And that bill recently got passed from the House over to the Senate. And so basically our targets will be on senators, letting them know we care that the current Right to Farm Act is good, it's good policy, and we shouldn't upend it without tightening it. And HB 1150 doesn't do that. It doesn't protect farmers or any Georgians for that matter. And so that's HB 1150. And then last but not least is House Bill 1083. That is a net metering bill. For folks who aren't familiar with net metering, I'll be really quickly. Basically, if you get rooftop solar, the amount of energy that you can provide back to the grid, to the larger electrical grid we're all a part of, can give you credit, which can help with your energy bill. As I stated earlier today, a lot of us struggle with energy bills, whether it be, triple digits, whether it be, a large section of your income. Rooftop solar can help alleviate some of that financial impact. So HB 1283, not 1283, 1083, has been moving in the House. It recently got a hearing, and our wondrous executive director testified for it, testified in support of 1083. And we support 1083 because A, we want to make sure that congregations can have as much access to solar as, as needed, as we can give them, because I think a just transition is really important towards, making more renewable energy in the great state of Georgia. So that's kind of like top line what's going on at the state level under the Gold Dome.
Yeah, I mean, protecting the Okefenokee swamp, ensuring that there's no increased nuisances of farmlands by corporations, and a net metering bill so that solar is more fair for people, all good things that you're working on. And people oftentimes focus a lot on the Gold Dome, and that's important. We're about halfway through the session. Crossover Day is coming up here quickly. And after the session, we'll be turning our attention to the Public Service Commission. We'll be intervening in the docket on the Integrated Resource Plan and the rate case. And so I wonder if you could talk a little bit about kind of the importance of addressing energy burden in that body and what the Public Service Commission is and what it does.
Yeah, for sure. So as an introductory, the Public Service Commission is an elected body of 5 people. Those commissioners are essentially the head people in charge of Georgia Power. And so Georgia Power is one of the largest utilities in the state with over 1 million customers. And that's really significant because even if you are not a Georgia Power customer, your utility is still purchasing power from Georgia Power. And that's significant because when it comes down to regulation, granted, yes, the Public Service Commission directly regulates Georgia Power, though they may have influence over an electric membership co-op or over a city-owned utility. And so the Public Service Commission, every 3 years, Georgia Power files this fun thing called an IRP. That's an integrated resource plan, which is just a fancy way of saying, hey, this is what we plan to do for the next 10 years. Can we do it, please? So they file this to the Public Service Commission, and the Public Service Commission has the opportunity to say yay or nay. So in the integrated resource plan, they can say, ooh, we want solar, and we want this, and we want to pay for this. And like, it's basically just, you know, a document that lays out energy projects. So that's what I mean by every time you flip a switch in your house, think about the Public Service Commission, because where our energy comes from ultimately is a policy decision. It is something somebody votes on. So the Public Service Commission, that's something that's processed, the IRP, the filing, all of that. That's a process that's actually going to happen throughout this year. It's not something that's like, you know, like a set date. There's going to be hearings, there's going to be, you know, public engagement. And so that's a process that we will keep you abreast of throughout this year. Though we want to bring that up because, as I just stated with solar, when we're talking about solar, when we're talking about Plant Vogtle, Georgia's nuclear plant, what have you, all of that is under the purview, well, I'll say majority of it is under the purview of the Public Service Commission. So if you're like, wow, my bills are so high, or I want rooftop solar, a lot of these energy policy decisions are directly under the Public Service Commission. That's inclusive also gas and other things, but for the sake of time, we're just gonna talk about energy. But yeah, so that's five elected officials. Sometimes they are appointed by the governor. They are currently a statewide race. So if you are a Georgia resident and you flip a switch in your house, and you should know the Public Service Commission, and you should be, you know, I would hope that you were knowledgeable about, you know, what they do in the state.
Yeah, it's helpful for people to know that, you know, we were just talking about the net metering bill and the initial 5,000 cap of who could get into that program was initially given the green light by the Public Service Commission. You know, how much you pay on your energy bill is regulated by the Public Service Commission. Your nuclear cost recovery rider that you pay is regulated by the Public Service Commission. All these different things, all the different fees that you pay on your bill are regulated by that body. And even more so, you want coal plants to close, or you want an increase in solar on the whole energy mix. This is the 5 people that make that process happen. And so we'll be rolling out ways for people to get more involved and to learn more information. The Gold Dome and the Public Service Commission serve as our kind of core advocacy places at the state level. But recently we've been doing some work at the federal level and trying to get big, bold, clean energy investments and infrastructure investments at the federal level that'll make their way down here to Georgia. And so I wonder if you could say a little bit about that and what we're hoping for in the most recent package.
Yeah, absolutely. So as folks may know, we recently saw the State of the Union by the president, which if you're a fan of the climate, you were happy about because President Biden has said it. He's like, if send a bill to my desk that has climate investments in it, whether that be energy tax credits, whether that be, you know, investing in energy infrastructure, send it to my desk and I'll sign it, which was a big hooray for a lot of us in climate, because ultimately, like we were saying earlier, this is a structural issue. So for example, if you're someone who is just like, we need to, you know, close all this coal and we need to invest in renewable energy, that's something that has to happen. That needs funding, whether that be funding for jobs, funding for the actual permits to do all these things, funding to close these things. Like, there's different elements to how these things have to come about. And so with these climate investments, we want to make sure that they serve underserved communities, Black and Brown communities, working class folks, people of marginalized gender, making sure that the people who are closest to the energy burden, you know, the high energy bills, closest to the flooding, closest to the outages, making sure those people are the closest to those good jobs, whether that be working in solar, whether that be working in, you know, hydro, what have you. And so that's climate, but also on the federal level, we have 2 senators that are also pro-climate. Whoop, whoop. Senator Ossoff has introduced the Chattahoochee River Act, which seeks to protect the Chattahoochee River, which provides water to a lot of us in Metro Atlanta. But also there's the Wildlife Act, which the Georgia Wildlife Federation supports because it helps protect local, wildlife, natural, biological diversity, which is really significant when we're thinking about illnesses. Like when we're thinking about how people are well in this society, we have to think about our relationship to nature, whether that be literal animals, but also the plants and producers that help sustain our healthy breathing. Also going back to the Okefenokee, those wetlands help protect and filtrate our water. And so when we're thinking about all these different infrastructures and how we invest in them, it all goes back to all of us. Like it's not something that, is separate from us. It's not something that it's something that you think about every day. Like every time you take a sip of water, think about the fact that it had to be filtrated. Think about the fact that it comes from somewhere, and often a local water body. So those are the fun things that we're thinking about on the federal level, and we'll hope that people like y'all will, sign our petitions to call on Biden to be like, okay, we care about these climate investments. We would like to see more. We love to see you talk about the climate, because there's really no such thing as talking about the climate too often, especially the nuances of what we're saying in energy and tax credits. There's a lot of detail. So the more the merrier in terms of talking about the climate in a way that's meaningful.
There's so many things for people to get involved in. There's so many great bills at the state level. There's so many great bills at the federal level. And I'm sure there are people who are wondering, how do I get involved and do this? I've already said we'll drop some links in the comments so that you can help to send petitions, to help send letters to your representatives at the state level and also at the federal level on these issues. But one of the things that we love the most about our work is helping to equip people to engage at the local level at these systemic issues. And the way that we do that is through Capitol Conservation Day. And so I wonder, Gayla, if you tell us a little bit about Capitol Conservation Day. Again, we'll drop a registration link in the comments so that people can register for these events. But Gayla, take it away.
Yeah, for sure. So Capitol Conservation Day is a little bit different this year, but you'll love it because it's actually multiple days this year. Because typically in the past, it's, one day where you come and you get a cute little breakfast, and then we talk to you about environmental policy and how to lobby and all these fun things. And then we let you go and do it, which is very similar to that this year, though, in light of being, COVID responsible. There are multiple days that people can come. So first and foremost, if you're someone who's brand new to policy and you're like, oh, I don't know anything about the Gold Dome, there's a training that will also be in the links. But there's a training that's going to be hosted on Thursday to help folks like you understand the policy, but also if you've never spoken to a legislator before in your life, which it happens, that's not weird. If you've never done it before, there's a training to make sure that you feel welcome, to make sure that you feel like you can have your voice heard. So that training is coming up on Thursday, and then there are multiple days that will also be a part of the registration. That's essentially the day where there's going to be food, and then we talk to you. There's going to be a lot of talking just because there's a lot of detail, and also if you have questions, we want to answer them. But basically they're going to talk about them, and then you're going to go and lobby, whether that be go and talk to them directly, whether that be talking to a legislative assistant, what have you. You're going to go and lobby, and afterwards you're going to come and talk to us and basically tell us, what did you hear? Just because depending on who you speak to, there's different information that a legislator might tell you. A legislator might tell you, oh, I support this bill if it had this in it, or, I want to support this bill, but it doesn't have this in it. Those details are really significant in our advocacy because we want to make sure that there's policy that serves both people and the planet. And so that's what's going to happen basically for Capitol Conservation Day. Those 3 days will be in the registration. And it's also hosted by the Georgia Water Coalition. There are over, I want to say, 200 organizations in the Water Coalition. So don't feel lonely. Don't feel like you're going to come down here and you're like, oh gosh, what am I doing? No, there's tons of people like myself here to talk you through what it looks like, whether it be training, information, what have you. And so, yeah, that's Capitol Conservation Day.
Yeah, this is the best way for people to make an impact. And if you're new to advocacy work, if you're new to talking to representatives and your senators, this is a great way to do that. We're going to have the training on Thursday. Then there are 3 days throughout March that you can come up to the Capitol, get a little briefing, and then walk across the street and go lobby. And Gayla will be there for all of those and is happy to guide you through the process. So please join us for that. Gayla, thank you so much for not only coming on Coffee and Something Stronger this morning, but of being part of the team, expanding our capacity. Thank you to everybody who has supported us on this journey. If you want to continue to support Gayla's work and the work that we do on advocacy, you can always donate at GIPL.org, and we'll put it towards this work. Gayla, thank you so much for coming on this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, thanks everybody. We'll see you in a couple of weeks for another episode of Coffee and Something Stronger. Have a good day.
Have a good one, y'all.